Tonight, I want to take you on a journey back to November 2nd, 2016. Not just a baseball game, and not just a World Series, but to the greatest game ever played in the long and winding history of Major League Baseball. A game that doesn't just unfold on the field, but in the hearts of millions. A game that feels less like a sporting event and more like a living, breathing epic. I'm talking about Game 7 of the 2016 World Series. The Chicago Cubs versus the Cleveland Indians. A game that wasn't just a contest. It was a collision of curses, hope, heartbreak, and destiny. And for me, it had a personal feeling about it. I've been a Cleveland Indians fan most of my life. My first game was way back in 1970 at the old historic Municipal Stadium, where Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak was stopped. World Series games were played there in 1948 and 1954. A place so big and empty some nights that you could hear your own thoughts bouncing off the upper deck. I grew up with the Indians with losing seasons in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I endured heartbreaks that Cleveland Browns fans know by name, the way other cities know their monuments. The fumble, the drive, Red Right 88. These weren't just plays, they were emotional landmarks. They were part of our identity. So when the Indians finally reached the World Series in 1997, they were 1 out away. 1 out from ending a drought that stretched back to 1948, long before I was even born. But Cleveland sports dreams, well, they often come with a disclaimer. Now, baseball has given us some legendary World Series games over the decades. Games that live in the collective memory of fans everywhere. Game 6 of the 1975 World Series. Carlton Fisk waving the ball fair. Game 7 of 1991. Jack Morris pitching 10 shutout innings. Game 6 in 1986. The ball rolling through Bill Buckner's legs. Game 7, 1960, Bill Mazeroski's walk-off homer. Those games were iconic. They were unforgettable. But none had the emotional weight, the drama, the twists, the curses, the rain delay, the extra innings, the generational suffering, and the personal stakes of Game 7, 2016. Let me set the scene. It's November 2nd, 2016. The Cubs haven't won a World Series since 1908. The Indians haven't won since 1948. Two franchises carrying more baggage than an airport carousel. And earlier that year, the Cleveland Cavaliers finally broke through with LeBron and company. I remember thinking, maybe, just maybe, this is Cleveland's year. But baseball had other plans. The night before Game 7, Patty and I drove to Progressive Field for Game 6. We brought my son Keith along. We didn't have tickets, but we had hope. We walked around the stadium, soaking in the electricity. The air felt different. It felt like destiny was warming up in the bullpen. However, we couldn't get scalper tickets. It turns out destiny is expensive. But we got great pictures, great memories, and the feeling that something enormous was coming. Game 7 starts with Chicago Cubs Dexter Fowler leading off the game with a home run. That was a gut punch, a reminder that the Cubs came to play. The Indians fight back. Cleveland ties it. Then Cleveland takes the lead. The crowd becomes a living organism. Then the Cubs surge again. Chicago storms back ahead 5-3. Then it goes to 6-3. Momentum swinging like a pendulum in a hurricane. Now it's the bottom of the 8th. The Indians down 6-4. Aroldis Chapman on the mound throwing fastballs. Rajai Davis steps in. A role player, a journeyman, a man who wasn't supposed to be the hero. A moment that will live forever.
2 outs, Guyer at second. 6-4, Cubs leading the Indians. Game 7 of what has been a classic World Series between two teams that have longed for that championship more years than any other two franchises in baseball. 68 years for the Indians, 108 years for the Cubs. Now the pitch. Swung on, line to deep left field. It is gone! See the celebration out of the Indians' third base dugout. Rajai Davis, a bullet.
Tom Hamilton delivers one of the greatest calls in Indians history. That home run wasn't just a swing. It was a lifetime of Cleveland heartbreak suddenly punching back. Now, back to the game. After Davis's homer, the stadium was electric. The crowd was roaring. The momentum seems to be shifting. And then the skies open. A rain delay. Because this game needed one more twist. Two cursed franchises. Game 7. High score. Extra innings. The tension is now unbearable. And now, rain. Baseball has a sense of drama and a sense of humor. Now, while all this drama was unfolding, Patty and I were at home watching the game, but also watching the clock. It was late. We had to get up early the next morning. After 9 innings and the score tied and the rain delay, we actually went to bed. But as we lay there, staring at the ceiling, the same thought hit both of us. We can't miss this game. It was like a voice from Field of Dreams whispering, "Go the distance." We looked at each other and got back up. After midnight, sleep was important, but history was calling. And here is where fate really kicks in. Patty is a Cubs fan, born just a couple hours south of Chicago. A few years ago, I had taken her to Wrigley Field. And then, just a few months earlier, to the Field of Dreams in Dyersville, Iowa. She stood on that pitcher's mound in her Cubs jersey. I stood beside her in my Indians jersey. A woman nearby said, "Let me take your picture." She snapped what has now become an iconic photo. To this day, I wonder, was she an angel in disguise? When play resumes, the Cubs strike first in the 10th. They go up 8-6. The Indians fight back, scoring once more. But in the end, at 1 a.m., the Cubs suddenly have won the game and the World Series.
This is going to be a tough play. Bryant, the Cubs win the World Series. Bryant makes the play. It's over.
Patty jumps up from her seat and squeals with joy. I look at her, smiling. Happy for her, happy for the Cubs, happy for history. And yes, I take my usual place in Cleveland sports lore. Another heartbreak, another almost. But this time, it didn't feel cruel, just bittersweet. In baseball, as in life, you celebrate the victories, you endure the heartbreaks, and sometimes when the moment calls for it, you get back out of bed at midnight and go the distance, because you never know when history will step up to the plate. This game wasn't about winning or losing. It was about the journey, the suffering, the hope, the curses, the fans, families, and the memories. It was about Patty and me, sitting up past midnight, refusing to miss history. It was about taking my son Keith, standing outside Progressive Field with us during Game 6, soaking in the energy of a World Series night. It was about decades of Cleveland heartbreak and Chicago long suffering into one unforgettable night. Sometimes sports gives us more than wins and losses. Sometimes it gives us stories, and stories behind the story. Some games are remembered, some are celebrated, and a few, just a rare few, become legend. And that's the story behind the story of Game 7 of the 2016 World Series between the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians. It wasn't just the greatest Game 7 ever played. It was the greatest World Series game in baseball history. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did.
I did.
The echoes of the past are waiting to be heard. My name is Brian Smith, and we are history.